started. We're running a little 10 minutes late. So right now, I really do need to stay centered. So I'm a little frazzled from the techie issue, but that was totally on me. Operator error completely. So welcome, everyone. It's so good to see the participants on the webinar. I did want to see your lovely faces in Zoom. So the second follow-up session, part 2 to the self-management strategies, will probably be video Zoom, so we can have a little more interaction, and because this is really to your benefit, and I want to make sure that you have some contact with other people. So welcome, everybody. So today's webinar is on part of our series, the COVID-19 series, is staying centered in a crisis, self-management strategies. Let me move over here. So just a couple of reminders. I know you guys are probably Zoomed to no end in Zoom meetings, webinars, and such, so you probably know how to navigate pretty well through the system. But just some courtesies around Zoom. So when we're all in a meeting, I know sometimes we like to multitask and do other things, but if you can stay present and engaged, I tried to create that engagement through asking questions for you guys so that you can type them into the chat. Right now you're all muted. We may have a point in time to where we can unmute you and you can share, or if you have a specific question, we may have you do that. I have tech support kind of in the background to manage the chat box, so if I can't get to it, then my person will, so be kind to us. We have you raise your virtual hand at the very bottom, and then you can comment in the chat box if you have any questions. Okay, so just a quick practice, let's raise your virtual hand. So if you go down to the very bottom, you should see where the participants are, and you should be able to raise your hand. Awesome, a couple of you. So it looks like everybody's giving me a high five. Perfect, so welcome everybody. And then chat box, we want to make sure that you're able to access your chat box. So at the very bottom, you'll see the chat box as well. So just tell me what organization you are representing today. And just enter that in the chat box and I'll give you a shout out. Cool, we got Santa Clara Pueblo Housing Authority, NADC, Clearinghouse. Hi, Andy. Stephanie Damon from Pine Hill. Thunder Valley CDC. Welcome, ladies. We have a couple of Oweesta folks on. NHA Pine Hill. Oh, I got a lot of my native peeps, my Navajo peeps on, so welcome. Chi Ishabak. Great, so we have good representation from people across the country, so welcome all of you. So my name's Linnell Smith. I am a program manager with First Nations Oweesta, and I proudly come from the Navajo Nation. So right now I'm in Phoenix, living in Phoenix, be relocating to New Mexico relatively shortly. So I've been with Oweesta for about, geez, maybe 5.5 years now. So enjoy what I do. So I'll be running this webinar, and you might be thinking, like, why is Linnell running a self-care webinar? Maybe she's not the best person, because I do a lot of technical assistance. But self-care is really important, and it's really become very important to me in the past year. Some of you may know that I've been enrolled in a coaching certification program. It's a 9-month program. And so as of this weekend, I will be an official certified coach. So it's a pretty intense program, but it taught me a lot to look inwardly and personally at things that may impact my emotional status, my mental status, and just really getting to understand all the different parts of me, and how do I get myself aligned and create a balanced life. So this is really helpful information, and sometimes just having the opportunity to share with others and give them ideas on what are some self-care strategies, because people may have a certain specific definition to it that might not necessarily be what you think it is. So we want to share that information there. So welcome, everybody. First off, we're going to use the chat box here, and it's just our warm-up question, and I want to hear from you guys. Just one word, type into the chat box, one word that describes how you're feeling right now at this moment about the whole COVID-19 pandemic. So if you would enter that into the chat box. One word. Over it, uncertain, exhausted, yikes, tired, perfect, pressure, done, overwhelmed. Yeah, so we have all kinds of things, unbalanced. So this whole new environment that we're having to navigate now can affect everybody in different ways. And so just how you're feeling, just to let you know that a lot of people are feeling the same way. And so part of this webinar and conversation and sharing strategy here is to really look at from different lenses, how can we take care of and balance those emotions and feelings that we're having right now within us about the situation, because realistically, we might be in the same situation for maybe to the end of the year, and maybe even going into next year, how it's impacting our work life, our personal and family lives, and just our overall financial health as well. So how do we keep centered and grounded in all of this? Those are the things that we want to give you some tools around. So when we're thinking about the social distancing and quarantine requirements within our communities, they may vary state to state, community to community. I know on my reservation, Navajo Nation, the statistics sound very grim and dire. Now we're the #1 hotspot in the country, surpassed New York. So those are things that I think about. My heart is with the Navajo Nation. I'm no longer residing there, but just having that tie and knowing that my family is there, my parents, it creates an emotional stress for me and anxiety for the unknown. So those are things that I'm feeling, and maybe many of you may be feeling the same way, or having to deal with boredom or the uneasiness and making this adjustment with your kids in your home 24/7. So there's no break from you going to work and no break from you going, or the kids going to school. So just adjusting to this new schedule can be even stressful when we're creatures of habit. Generally, we do a lot of the same things over and over. And so when we have to make adjustments, change can be uneasy. So we want to, the question we're seeking here is, how do I align myself into a balanced life during this whole quarantine and COVID-19 pandemic? So first off, I heard this quote actually just yesterday when I was in one of my sessions, and it really resonated with me, and I think it resonates with a lot of the individuals that are working in the industry so tirelessly now. But there is no perfection in the pandemic. You should not be working as hard as you would otherwise. So, and I've heard this from many people, even within our Oweesta team, that the job is from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed. So people are constantly working, replying to emails, strategizing, having to deal with keeping your organization afloat, maybe adjusting budgets. Maybe you've suffered income loss within your family, so the financial stress of that. So there's many things that can impact you. And some people really feed off of the fast pace of work. One of the things that I want you to consider in this is that part of the self-care strategy is actually seeing what it can do to your body and how your body's responding. Sometimes people get migraines, sometimes people are just, maybe they can't sleep. So one of the first things too is to really just be attentive to what your body's telling you. So take a pause and kind of listen to it. Is there an ache in your back? Is there a tension headache that you feel coming on? Is there a knot in your stomach? So just taking a moment and just kind of sit there and ask your body, what are you trying to tell me? So really getting in tune with that. But first off, to start, I wanted to share just a quote to kind of center and ground us at this moment in time as we're walking through the webinar. So I'm going to read this here. It is okay if progress looks different in this season. Be kind to yourself here. None of this is easy. And even in stress, it's not wrong to long for rest. And you are no less worthy of love because you are working through tough things. Even when there is not enough time or resources for you to take a break, you are still worthy of rest all the same. And I hope amidst it all, you can rest in some way. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for showing up in such a brave way. Your presence matters. Yes, your presence matters. So no matter where you are on this journey, be kind to yourself today. And this was Morgan Harper Nichols. So I just want you to sit with that just for a moment and the words and how it resonates to this point in time that we're at. So really just taking this part of the self-care strategy is just taking a moment and letting it be okay to rest and in the chaos of the day. So that's something that you can do. And I will go ahead and share the quote or the poem in the chat box. So actually, let me do that right now. Oh, I can't do that. Geez, I have tech support, but I need to learn how to be my own tech support sometimes. Okay, so Brian, if you can pull that from the notes and then drop it in the chat if you're able to, that would be absolutely amazing. Thank you. Okay, so if everybody wants to just kind of mellow into those words and we can move on. So what is self-care? So by definition, self-care is any activity that we do deliberately in order to take care of our mental, emotional, and physical health. So it sounds very simple in theory when you read it. It's like, oh yeah, I do that all the time. I'm very much aware of my mental, emotional health. I get my 7 hours of sleep a night. But if you really look into yourself and look at your schedule and what you're doing and what are good things, what is my ideal life, what makes me happy. So sometimes it can be as simple as that to think about what self-care is. And we're going to talk about some of those things. What self-care isn't. So this is actually pretty important as well, maybe even more important than defining what self-care is. So when we think what it's not, it's when you're forcing yourself to do something you don't enjoy. And you want to do things that make you happy, simple as that. And I'm going to give you an example. When I was younger, like in my 20s and early 30s, I had a lot of friends that would run. They really enjoyed it. They talked about the runner's high. And I kept trying because I thought, okay, I need to run. It's healthy. It'll do my body good. And I was trying to force myself into an activity that I wasn't enjoying at all. I never felt the runner's high, never could get into that. So I stopped. But when I went back to it, when I was healthier and stronger, it was something that I enjoyed. So it might be even just something that is in a point in time that we might not enjoy it, and try it out again. There might be something new to that. But if you enjoy cooking or baking, maybe that's a way of self-care. But if you absolutely hate being in the kitchen, it feels like a job, you're so over it, you're done, then that's probably not the best self-care option. So one of the things that you can do here, that we'll talk about also a little later, is really defining what you enjoy and what you don't enjoy. So it makes it a little simpler to um, actually figure that out when you actually have a list. Let me see, I think we have a couple of hands raised. So again, bear with me here, I'm navigating. Okay, Evangeline. So I'm gonna unmute you, Evangeline, and do you have a question? For some reason, okay. I can't seem to unmute you. So if you happen to have a question, Evangeline, you may be able to unmute yourself. Okay, sorry about that. Go ahead and enter into the chat, or the Q&A would be great, if you do have a question. Okay, so challenges to self-care. So I'm curious to hear from you all in the chat box. Think about what are some limitations or challenges that you encounter that might keep you from practicing self-care on a regular basis. So some things that may be posed as challenging or limitations to getting self-care done for yourself. Time, not enough time, social distancing right now. Everything's closed. Time, lots of not enough time. Getting the kids to adjust as well. Yeah. So lots of things can inhibit us from implementing self-care. So taking care of your children, just the whole new environment. But it sounds like the biggest challenge is not enough time. Putting others before me. Definitely. And so I want to share a few things, and this has been conversations that I've been participating in, as far as like, walking through this whole self-care and talking about the impacts and how we're dealing within the pandemic. And one of the things that I've shared that was very eye-opening for me is during this, the past 10 months, I've learned to accept and appreciate self-care and realize that it's very important to my own personal growth and health and mental status. And I was one that would always put others first. When you're a parent, you tend to naturally do that. And being a single parent, there didn't seem like there was enough time to do anything other than work, survive, take care of kids, cook, clean, all of these things that we do on the daily. And when I thought about making time for myself, it actually made me feel like I was being selfish and indulgent. And so those were things that I had to work through, that it's not being selfish and indulgent. It's really making time for yourself so that you can present and be your best self for people around you, whether that's your family, your kids, your coworkers, and really honoring who you are as a person. So that was something that was very eye-opening for me, was that it's it's really taking care of your overall being. And when you feel good, when you feel like you're on top of your game, you've got enough rest, you're mentally focused, then things are easy to attack and get things done. So that's one of the things that I kind of took from this whole journey that I am on. And I've heard many people share that, the mom guilt, that, oh, I shouldn't go to the gym. I have my kids at home. So there are a lot of challenges. And also just thinking and looking at the situation that we're in. If working out was your thing and you would go to a gym, those are closed or limited operational hours. Many states are slowly opening up, so those might become more available. But you may have feelings about being in large crowds now. So there's very many impacts to what the situation that we're dealing in that might still limit us from doing what we enjoy. So one of the first things that I want you guys to do is like release your limitations about self-care. So all these different parts within us are telling us that, for me, it was you're self-indulgent, you're being selfish, there's not enough time. We all have these voices within us. And sometimes it's just a matter of doing that self-talk and tell yourself, it's okay to prioritize myself. It's okay to make me number one at this point in time of my day. And then talk to those parts of you that might be telling you, you don't have time for this. There's too much work to be done. Once you wake up, you got to knock out that to-do list. You got to make more lists. So there's so many parts that might be talking to you that are telling you, don't spend time for yourself. And just tell them you hear them. Step to the back, because I'm going to go ahead and focus on myself, because that's important as well. And then just give yourself some grace in this time and space to do that. And I know time was one of the biggest limitations or challenges. And self-care can be 5 minutes a day. Self-care can be an hour a day. Self-care, I've heard people take 4 hours out of their day just to work on themselves. And that looks very different for different people. So it just depends on what you feel comfortable with and what you enjoy. So in this setting, self-care means different things to different people. And I've heard many people talk about meditation. I do yoga. There's like hot yoga, there's meditative yoga. Maybe I like to cook, or I like to eat. I'm the foodie, so that makes me happy. Maybe I read, listen to audiobooks, I work out. I like to go hiking. I like to just spend some time in the bath and just enjoy my quiet time. So there's different things that we can do that can fall into that category of self-care. So when we think about that, I'm curious to hear from you all. What are you doing for self-care? Or what have you tried that's maybe different than what I've mentioned? What are some of your self-care strategies? So if you can put that into the chat box, that'd be great. Smudging to prevent judging. Because sometimes it's the process of just that cleansing from smudging, doing cedar, crying. Sometimes the release of the emotion and whatever those tears are telling you, and letting yourself be okay with that. Deep breaths and being mindful of it. Definitely. Sweat lodge, walking, gardening. Some people like to do yoga. Definitely. So really some good self-care strategies. And a lot of these things you can still do within quarantine. So even though we're social distancing and in quarantine for the most part, these self-care strategies you can do by yourself. I think sweat lodges might not necessarily be recommended right now just because there's probably more than 5 people in there, but it can still be done. But other than that, everything else that was mentioned can be done in the comfort of your home, and it's just modifying it. So having your mind adjust to the new environment that it's in and being okay with that shift, and doing yoga by yourself instead of in a group, or taking the walks with the family. So I've heard many people talk about walking with their children on the daily. So now it's a family activity to walk with the dogs or to just be out in nature. I wanted to also share one of the things, well, actually that's on the next slide. I'll pause there and share in a moment. So lots of good self-care strategies. Some of the things that others have shared is block out a personal hour on your calendar, because a lot of us are still working day to day, that we need to actually allocate time for ourselves. And this was a strategy from a good friend of mine that was, she would just put it in the middle of the day. And sometimes we don't even pause to take lunch. I've seen many people have lunch while they're on Zoom meetings because everything's feeling back to back. So if you just allocate a time for yourself within your calendar, make an appointment with yourself. This is your self-care appointment. So whether that's just sitting and spending time alone, or sitting outside and watching the birds and listening to the birds, that can be mental therapy for you as well. You can tap into your artistic side, drawing, doodling, painting, Etch-a-Sketch kind of stuff. So maybe you start beading again. I've seen a lot of tutorials and on Instagram where they have live sessions, so you can paint with people, you can bead. So there's a lot of different things, and maybe you want to share a skill with others. You can actually start doing that and sharing that as well. And then some people take a midweek break. So if we're working Monday through Friday, or you're working 7 days a week, I've heard many people doing that, so you're constantly on, then take a break in between, and that can be an hour, that can be a 4-hour break, to where you can just take pause and do things that refresh you. Other suggestions will work when you're fresh in the AM. If you're on, schedule your stuff in the morning if possible. If afternoons when you're at your best, then schedule those appointments and meetings in the afternoon. And I'm curious to talk with your staff, if you would be willing to talk with your staff, team members, others around you, that if you're working more than 40 hours, ask them, what would it look like to honor yourself with a 40-hour work week? If you actually said to yourself that you would spend 40 hours at work and the rest of it is time away from work, what does that look like? And when I posed this question to an individual, they were like, I can't even imagine it right now because I'm working 10 to 12 hours a day. And so really sitting there and thinking, like, what does an 8-hour day look like? Or 4 10-hour days? And once they can see it, how do you make that happen? What are some things that you can do to make sure that happens? And then stop and find the humor in day-to-day with family and appreciate those moments. And what I mean by that is that we're living in a world where everybody's probably all in the same house. You may have young children, you may have teenagers, you may have college students that came home from their breaks, and all the adults are working all under the same roof. So it's okay when things happen. It's okay if the kids pop in on a Zoom meeting. I think they've even had commercials on TV where kids are fighting, like brawl in behind the parent that's on a Zoom meeting. So sometimes it's just, you have to find the humor in the situation that you're in. One of my clients had shared that she was on a Zoom meeting, she was presenting, and her 2-year-old jumped on her lap and started picking her nose, and right in front of the Zoom session, and then stuck her finger in her mouth right after. And so she said she was so mortified. She shut the video off, took care of the kid, and then came back. But it gave everybody a moment to kind of laugh in the meeting. And the day after, she found that it was like, this was actually, yeah, something to appreciate, because those are moments that you probably won't have again necessarily. So just sit and appreciate the things that are going on around you. Many of you had said to pray or meditate, and prayer can take a minute. Prayer can be a few seconds a day. Whatever grounds you and centers you and calms you is part of self-care. Meditation, I totally had a different view of meditation like 2 years ago. I thought it was clearing your mind, not thinking about anything, and just kind of being still and present and quiet. That's not necessarily what meditation is. So your mind is wired to constantly be thinking. So part of it when you're meditating is just being aware of when your mind starts wandering and making lists, or what do I have to do? Did I take out the chicken to defrost for dinner tonight? Did I send off that email that I was going to do? And part of meditation is just being mindful of those things where your mind is going, and then bringing it back to the moment. And they have meditation apps that are available that are free. I actually use them all the time now. That's how I go to sleep, because I don't sleep very well. It's helpful. They have short meditations. They have hour-long meditations. So you can use an app to guide you if you're new to that practice. Limit or eliminate social media. This was a recommendation, just kind of unplugging and turning off. Right now, we get so much information from the news and from live feeds and Twitter, what's going on in the government, what's going on with our tribe. And sometimes that information can be very overwhelming for individuals. So shutting it off, turning off for a few hours a day, or you can even limit your time on social media. There's settings within an iPhone. I'm sure most other phones, like Android phones, I'm sure have that same setting as well. So you can start that practice to where you're turning off social media and not accessing so much information, because that can be anxiety. So part of these self-care strategies is to know what works for you. If you feel yourself getting stressed out by watching the news, then limit that maybe to once a day. If you can't sleep, look at your patterns. Maybe you're watching the news about the pandemic at 10:30 at night, and then you're trying to go to sleep, but you're thinking about all the things that are going on in the country or back on in your communities. So look at your patterns. What's your trigger that makes you get that feeling in your body that's just uneasy, or the anxiety kicks in? And then find out what, if you eliminate it, how do you feel then? So process of elimination. A lot of people like to read books. They were even encouraging actually going back to real books, to where it's not everything digital, because that goes back to we spend so much time on Zoom. We're doing these virtual meetings, webinars, TV, our phones. So sometimes just going back to the paper books and flipping through, that can be meditative and therapeutic. Is just reading a book and flipping through magazines. So these are some of the things that individuals have found helpful as self-care strategies. And then also, this is really important, especially for those that are working, is to really decide when your day ends. If you want to end your day at 5 o'clock, you have the power to end your day at 5 o'clock. And sometimes it's just putting it out there. If your colleagues are working with adjusted schedules. You can just say, well, my working hours right now are 9 to 5. I have a hard stop at 5, putting it out there and having them create this accountability for you. So once they know that your day is ending at 5, then chances are they won't be sending emails, or they'll let you know that, hey, you don't have to reply. I'm just getting this out there because I'm working. My modified schedule is in the evening. So just having people be aware of that would give yourself a little flexibility if your office and team allows that. One of the other things too is that ask for help. In this situation, sometimes we can do all the self-care strategies that we have available to us. We are at home, we have our team there. Sometimes we just forget that we can ask for help, and help looks different to different people as well. So if that's just, hey, can you check on me? At the end of the day, I just need a call to kind of center myself and vent, or anything like that. Can you pick up some groceries for me? I'll transfer the money via Venmo, or anything like that that can provide some relief and maybe allocate some time that will free up some time for you. One of the other things too is keep a routine, but don't keep a routine. And I love this one because there's so many things out there that was like, try and allocate self-care as a part of your day. And sometimes that's just plain old hard. We don't have that luxury, or our schedules may change day to day. So if you can, when I say keep a routine, have self-care as a daily practice, but don't tie yourself to where it has to be 12 to 1. I'm going to do meditation. I'm going into my closet in my room for quiet, and I'm going to meditate for an hour. Sometimes that 12 to 1 doesn't work with your work schedule or with the kids' schedule. So you still want to do self-care, but maybe it's a 5-minute meditation rather than an hour-long one in the middle of the day. So give yourself that flexibility to keep a routine, but not have to stick to a regimented routine. One of the things that I love now is journaling. I was never one to journal, but it's actually really therapeutic. They have passion planners and gratitude journals, which is really fun. When you're in a situation that is not ideal, so this pandemic is not ideal in a lot of community, like in the world. So just doing a gratitude journal and listing out what you are thankful for can be a whole shift in your mindset. So that's a good way. And you don't have to like, oh, I have to go out to the store, or I need to get on Amazon to order a journal. You can just use a notebook, plain old notebook, and just journal in a notebook, some paper. People had mentioned gardening. Spending some time outside, I think, is really important. Just sitting there and watching the butterflies for an hour, or listening to the birds, and just spending time with nature and celebrate what's around you, because there's a lot of beauty in where we are and where we come from. You can also experiment with new recipes, just try some new things. You see all these YouTube videos, and if you're into TikTok, people are doing things there. What's fun too is just have a dance party by yourself, or a one-woman karaoke show. So just have fun, live in the moment during those times. And then one of the other things too that I've seen with people, and I think I mentioned on the previous slide, is that we can have back-to-back kind of stuff going on. You can adjust your schedule to where you have some time in between meetings. There's actual software programs that can help you do that. I use Calendly, Calendly, and it's a scheduling software that links in with your Gmail calendar or your Outlook calendar, and you can tell it, don't schedule anything, give me a 15-minute buffer between meetings or appointments. You can have a 30-minute buffer, you can have an hour-long buffer. So that just gives you the moment to like get organized. Maybe you need to eat, maybe you need to go take a shower, things like that. So it helps keep you on track with scheduling. So these are just some really simple things that you can do to incorporate into self-care. So it's not necessarily having to go work out or go do these really specific things that a lot of people tie to self-care, but it can be just really little simple things. And when we think about this, just think about what makes you happy, what brings a smile to your face, what recharges you. Maybe one of my clients said, I get in my car, I'll just drive and jam out. Like I'll listen to hard rock and I'll sing along. And when I get back home, she's like, I feel so much better. So it can be little things like that as well. So in the whole self-care realm, is that my challenge to you guys is to carve out some time today. So make that little bit of time today to create your list of self-care options. So I gave you a bunch of different things that are out there. You shared some self-care strategies and things that work for you. Make a list of that. And then don't forget to make a list of the things that you don't enjoy. So don't force yourself into something because you think it's the thing to do, or everybody is doing this now, so maybe I should give it a try. If you don't enjoy it, then don't do it, because then that's not part of self-care strategy. You want to have things that are enjoyable and that make you happy. But the other part to that is to actively plan for it each day. So make it a part of your schedule. I'm gonna make time for this today. And it, like I said, be kind to yourself, give yourself some grace. It might only be 5 minutes. It may be 30 minutes that day, or it may be a whole afternoon. I'm gonna do this once a week, midweek, to recharge so I can finish out my week strong. So be creative and think about all these different things that you can do while in quarantine or while you're social distancing. And if you're stuck and you have a block to like, what the heck can I do? Then that's when you can get on social media or get on the internet and find out what are some things that we can do to stay healthy in quarantine. There's tons of resources out there. One of the things that I wanted to share with you as well is, let me show you, and I will send this out to all of you. Give me just a moment. And of course, I cannot find it. Okay, but I'll make sure to get this to all of you, is that a list was developed of all the tours of these amazing places all over the world. They're museum tours, they're just general tours. There's links to zoos so you can actually watch the animals. So sometimes those things are therapeutic as well. So I'll definitely share that with all of you in the follow-up email, so you have that resource, and feel free to share it out as well. Last couple of slides. So upcoming webinars that we have, we're finishing up the Don't Get Written Off by Write-Offs webinar. That's for the loan loss reserve and best practices for write-offs during this time. That will be June 3rd at 1 p.m. And then the second session of Staying Centered in a Crisis Self-Care Strategies will be June 11th at 1 p.m. So for those of you that are on this one, if you join us on the 11th, I would love to hear from you guys on how your self-care work is going. I believe that's about 2.5 weeks away. So it gives you some time to start putting that into place and practicing. So I look forward to seeing and hearing from all of you at that point in time. So with that, does anybody have any final questions or comments? If you want to raise your hand, I can try and unmute you. If you want to send a question in Q&A, or you can send that via chat. We can definitely, and thank you, Brian, for dropping the poem into the chat box. And so if you go into the chat box, you can actually save the chat. I don't know if you guys know this, but if you click on those 3 little dots in the chat box and you hit save chat, it'll save it onto your system. So if you want to get the print up of the poem there, you can definitely do that. Okay, awesome. I don't see any questions. Do you, Brian? I think we're good. No questions. Thank you, Anna. Thank you very much. And I want to definitely thank all of you for your time and participation in today's session. And I hope you have some helpful strategies to center and ground you. Make sure you take care of yourself, be kind to yourself, and give yourself some time to just be in the moment. It's okay. And one other thing that I wanted to put out there too is that that I am available for coaching if that's something that your organization needs or wants, or you're just curious about it. You can definitely reach out to me as well. My email is there on the screen, lynell@oweesta.org, the main office phone number, but you can it'll definitely bump it over to my cell, so we can do that as well. So find us on Twitter, Facebook. If you're not on the listserv for the newsletter, jump on our website and sign up for that as well. So thank you all for your time and participation. It was great to get your feedback. So I look forward to our next time together. Thank you all. Thank you, Brian. We'll see you, Kendall. Thank you, Andy, Irene, Jacqueline, Emily, Witalu, Stephanie. Bye, Tricia. Thank you, Evangeline.